find a way to be vulnerable. Yeah, I think the healthiest, longest standing relationships that have been productive that I've seen, whether it's myself included or outside of myself, between Black men, um, is they're courageous enough to be vulnerable with each other and be like, yo, bro, this is what I could bring to the table. But also, these are the things that I actually struggle with, and I can't have you depend on me for this, right?
What's going on, everybody? I'm glad that you're back. We have another dope brother with us today. This brother has unbelievable talent as far as being a creative entrepreneur and everything else that involves bringing and elevating creatives together. We range from topics that expressed and talked about why spaces of creativity is needed, how your story is your greatest asset, and why being vulnerable with another brother can help us grow together. Enjoy. Welcome back, everybody. We have another dope brother with us today. We have a creative guru, a visionary, and the CCO of a multi-million-dollar company. Hey, brother, if you can introduce yourself, please do.
Yeah, man, happy to do so. First, thank you for having me, man. My name is Will Toms. I am the co-founder, chief creative officer of a company that we call Rec in Philly. They know us best as Rec Philly. And what Rec is a creative agency, but also a membership club for freelance creatives. And my whole vision there and our purpose for Rec is to really empower creative people to do more of what they love. We may get into that a little bit further, but that's really just a core piece of who I am. And fortunately, I've been able to build a business that connects to that. But I'm a proud Philadelphian. I'm a son, a grandson, and all those fly things. But also, creator made in the creator's image, man.
I feel you, brother. I feel you. I love the fact that you also gave your identities as well, because that's one thing that Black people love to do. We love to say we're a son, we're a cousin, nephew, all that. I think that's one thing that we love as Black people is to show our identities. And
Yeah,
I do want to just jump right in and get right into the first question I got for you.
let's get to it.
All right, brother. So, what's one thing you love about being
One thing I love about being a Black man is, I mean, there's just so much inherent swag and greatness just in our being. There's something special about knowing that everything comes from us. You feel me? Like,
a? I
you
feel
know what
you.
I mean? Like, especially when we just talk about Blackness, like, there's a swag to how we walk, to how we talk, to you know how we move energy in rooms.
Mm-hmm.
There's a certain creativity that's inherent, just in my Blackness, right? I wouldn't trade that for anything. There's just such a deep power in our identity when we get a chance to really lean into it. And also just that camaraderie, amongst Black men, like I could be moving in spaces and places, you know what I'm saying? I see another brother and you just give him that nod, you know what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? I think that's a solidarity that doesn't really get spoken on too often.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, man, that's one thing I love. I just love, the swag has been in us.
I agree with you, brother, because when you say swag is within us, I also say it's within everybody else. Let's be
Hmm.
honest. A lot of people want to be like us. A lot of people want to do things that we do.
That's
Like you
right.
said, we create everything first.
That's right.
And the fact that you created a system where, as Black people, you create a system where you see greatness, you see potential, you see love. I think
Yeah,
that's one thing that we support. And I think that
that's
as
right.
Black people, I can add that one thing that I love is that we're different, we're unique. When we
Yeah,
step into a room, a lot of people don't know what we're bringing. And I
yeah,
think when you bring that bag of just swag, love, and blackness, like you said,
Right. Yeah.
you get the real. And I think that's the main thing that
Yeah.
we see amongst us brothers and us sisters. We see the real. And
Yeah.
that's one thing that I love about it. Go ahead, brother. Go ahead.
Yeah, and one thing I would say, like, because I think you hit it on the head with that, like when you mentioned that, you kind of see our swag in everybody, right?
Yeah.
It's like, yo, we got to be honest, Black culture runs the world, and
Mm-hmm.
recently, Black culture, Black hip hop, right, became, officially kind of the biggest and largest and widest art form, right? So for me, that's why I get so proud about the work that I get to do, with Rec, because it's like, too long in the entertainment industry have we relied on other people to value our work, right? Tell us that, hey, I'm going to value it at this. And because they used to hold the keys to distribution and getting it on the radio or in the theaters, et cetera, we played that game, right? But technology is allowing us to, go direct to consumer, get our art, whether it's our fashion, our dances, our sayings, our music, get it right to the people who love it. And I
Yeah.
think that that's bringing a certain level of empowerment to a whole generation that we haven't seen before. So when we get to this place where like we could really sit in that power, yeah, it's get really inspired for what's going to come. Knowing that we'll be normalizing things like ownership and equity, especially when it's connected to how we express ourselves, right?
Yeah.
I think that's really like the key.
Okay. I get in that space of ownership. I know I gave you three titles that you love, but also you gave yourself titles as well, son and everything else. I think that one thing that we want to dig deep into is just how did you discover your blackness or being a black man? When did you discover that
Man, um, I don't know if the first time I discovered it was like by choice, you
moment?
know. Um, I had the experience of, my family's from Germantown,
Yeah. Okay.
so the earliest parts of my life I spent, in Germantown, and, I went to church, in Frankfurt, and I was in church a lot as a youngin. So like that was a really big part of my life. So in those environments, it wasn't a conscious thing to think of myself as a black person because everybody was black,
Yeah.
right? But then as I got older, and then my grandmother was like, "Yo, we gonna move out to this part of the area so we could go to this school and things like that." I ended up going to a predominantly white high school. Um, but even before then, like even in times of elementary and middle school, interacting with other kids, right, that didn't look like me, they always had a way, I think, of like reminding me, like, yo,
Mm.
you're different, right? And if I could like think back to some of the earliest moments, like, being a kid and even just feel like teachers treated me different,
Mm.
like I would realize like the expectations for my academic success seemed lower than the expectations that they would give others,
Mm.
right? And like between that and just playground stuff with kids, people saying what they want to say. Young kids are ruthless, right?
Oh,
Like I've definitely been on the receiving end of people calling me a nigger and all of that. So I think like those were the earliest moments of like recognizing my blackness. And unfortunately they weren't positive moments, right?
mm.
So there's all of that I think you navigate. And then, I think as I got older and really started to kind of like seek my own understanding and history for myself, it was almost like a deeper understanding of what my blackness really meant. And that was always in a more affirmative and positive manner, right? And I think it's important for us all to seek that out for ourselves to really be able to stand in that. And then the last thing I'll say is like, that's, you know, a little bit earlier in my journey, but even what's most recent for me is like I just got to go to Africa for my first time last month,
Yeah.
and that was just such a powerful experience of like just being able to really reconnect
Mm.
and also remember, right? Like just who we are and what we are. And I think the best way I've been able to articulate it so far is like I came back from Africa with what I feel is like an inheritance,
Okay.
not financial, but like spiritual and historical and cultural. Um, and that's been showing up in really beautiful ways since I've been back.
Okay. Congratulations. That's one place that I'm trying to get to with my wife and my family.
Beautiful. Yeah.
I want to thank you first for
Hmm.
providing me with that trajectory of having a negative experience
Mm.
and saying, hey, it's not all positive when I found out my blackness, but then you turned it into a positive as you got older. I think
Yeah.
that's one thing that we kind of, that journey that we go on, we're trying to figure out, okay, I'm black. How is that? I'm looking different from everybody else.
Yeah.
And how does that
And
play a role in my life?
yeah, and listen, and if I'm being super honest, like how that played a role in my life early was tough. Like, I come from parents who really were deeply affected by institutionalized racism and all of the things that come with the Black American experience.
Yeah.
Like my father's about to do his 25th year of incarceration this spring, right?
Okay.
Like my mother has battled a drug addiction for most of my life, and God rest her soul, she just passed away. But it's like I was a kid who, in the early days, especially when I'm navigating spaces with non-black people, I looked at my story as a vulnerability,
Mm-hmm.
right? I was in classrooms hoping that somebody didn't ask me what my dad does for work, right? Like bring your parent to class day. Like that wasn't a positive moment. And that was connected to my identity. Obviously, there's other races and cultures of people who experience things like that. But the difference was as a black person, it's like it's not all that abnormal, right? To have a family member incarcerated and things like that. So it was important for me to reframe those things, because as I got older, I realized, me hiding out, thinking my story is a liability is hurting me, in a personal sense, but also even in a professional sense. Because when I reframed it and really got to understand that, like, nah, my story is my greatest asset, it allowed me to show up for my people in a way that was much more real and connecting, you know? So yeah, I think that reframing piece is just vitally important, because it starts to reframe how you see yourself, and then what then becomes possible when you adopt a new mindset and perspective on who you are and what you are.
Okay. I do want to dig a little deeper into that because
Sure.
in this space that we have, it's called In the Den. So I already hit you with when did you discover your blackness? So it's also, when did you, or how did you explore those feelings of negativity when it came towards black in a different space? But then
Mm-hmm.
also, how did you explore your feelings of that wanting to talk about your dad, talk about your mom, and talk about
Yeah.
yourself and want people to connect with
Yeah. How did I explore it? I mean, poetry,
you?
art,
Yeah.
like I know a lot of people say this, they'd be like, yo, art saved my life, right? Or
Mhm.
music saved my life. But like
Yeah.
that's a real thing, like when you have those feelings of feeling, outcast, or too much of this for this crowd and too much of that for this crowd. Like for me, that pen was the first way of understanding myself fully, right? Because I had to just get it out to even know what it was that I was feeling. And then once it was out, it was like, oh, snap. Okay. How do I feel about what I just wrote and read
Mhm.
back, right?
Yeah.
And what do I want to do with this now that I
Mhm.
feel this way? So that was honestly where my love of art and creativity kind of started. It was first as someone writing poetry, and then I fell in love with visual arts, and I got my first camera. So then I'm
Mhm.
telling stories that just like resonated to me. And I didn't really know this super consciously when I'm doing it as like a teenager making short films or shooting music videos. And the subject matter is about kind of this feeling of alienation, right? And
Mhm.
maneuver in different circles. But looking back, right, I could tell that was me really just exploring self and healing self in certain ways.
Mhm.
Um, and then I fell in love with just like that version of myself that was expressive, right? That was creative. And I loved how I felt when I was around other creative people, right? Because that felt the safest. That felt like the best place for me to be the fullest version of me.
Mhm.
And both that idea of loving how I felt being around creatives, and the idea of like needing community, right? This idea of trying to find the spaces that made sense. both of those things directly impacted what I've really dedicated my life to now, which is rec, right? And literally, I build spaces for creatives. Um, but none of that would have been possible if I didn't find ways to explore, kind of what was happening, in here first, and then realizing, dang, I'm this black boy from Germantown ain't the only person who needs spaces like these, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, so here we are.
I'm glad that we are here now. I'm very glad that we're here right now because
Me too.
without you putting pen to paper, who knows what you would do? Like, let's be honest.
That's right.
For myself, I'm in the same space, brother. It's I do creative writing, so I've told people on several occasions that I got awards for writing, not for math, not for science, not for anything else. I got it for writing, and I got a surprise at my high school graduation, and they said the best writing award or whatever the award was called. They said, Octavius, come on up. I turned around and looked at my mom. My mom was like, go do what you do. And that's what I love to do. I love to write. And when I say write, I mean, I got it's called The Life of a Train Ticket. And a lot of people think it's about a young man getting on the train. I'm like, no, it's about the actual train ticket. And in that creative space, it's just about what happens to the life of that ticket that you have in your hand. And I just flow in that space, brother. And I think for you, and hearing you say I put pen to paper, you're a poet. I love to read poetry, but I don't write it. So I look at another brother that says, I put pen to paper. That's a challenge for me to say, hey, brother, you read it all the time. How about you try to do it? And I think for you, and I just said, who knows what could have happened, you picked a route for yourself and created a lane for yourself.
That's right.
Because a lot of black boys, a lot of black men are told to go into sports, the music industry. They're told to go those two industries, and that's it. And they're never told about the B plan to that specific route.
Yeah.
So when I say the B plan, I mean like, okay, you may not play basketball, you may not be the best in basketball, but you can be an agent.
Right.
You can be
it's a lot of jobs.
It's a lot of jobs
around it. It's hundreds of people are employed by the machine that is Beyonce, right? It takes a lot of careers to make Beyonce. So I agree with you, bro. And listen, and I think the other thing for me is like, oh, man, and you know what? So I know we already had this question, but like, I think the fondest moment where I really realized my difference and my blackness when I was in like a predominantly white space. I actually had a teacher in middle school who one of the assignments for like, I guess that like semester or whatever you want to call it in middle school, she challenged us to put together a poetry book, right? And that was so exciting for me because again, I'm this kid who was already writing and things like that. So I'm like, oh, okay, I could do this, right? This is fun. And I really challenged myself to like really like embrace it, right? And I remember writing a collection of like 12 to 15 poems, and they really were super personal about my uncle who had just been murdered and about my mom and about my dad and all these things. And I remember feeling so proud of the work that I had did. And then the time came, and she ain't mentioned this. She was like, all right, this is the part where we now share our poems with the class. And I was like, well, it's a whole different thing. What we talking about, right? Because it was so personal to me, but I remember just distinctly feeling like no one in this classroom is ready to hold my story, you know? Like, just because there's a disconnect, they not gonna understand, like they not gonna, you know what I mean? And I remember in those moments was like, and maybe a part of it was me separating myself, but it was us and them for real at that point. Cause it was like, nah, y'all not even ready, you know? But I think it was, you know, having mentors on TV at this point, right? I didn't know them in real life, but my mentors at that time were people like Puff and people like, you know, Master P and even like Hove, and then watching State Prop. Like those were the people who looked like me that were also building businesses, right? But they didn't have to switch up who they were to do it. And I think at that point in my life was like, I set the tone, I set like that intention and was like, yo, I have an opportunity to do that. And I just think like it's really hard to be what you can't see. So like having just models of that was a difference maker for me. And yeah, and, for me, I'm living my life in a way where hopefully I can be that difference maker for somebody else. You know.
Okay. I do want to ask because you did go backwards, so I do want to see how we can get through the understanding of the trajectory of you as a black man. So you talked about yourself as a young black man. You talked about yourself. I know you didn't talk about like high school and anything, but you also talk about you now. So I do want to ask the question of how did you navigate? I know you said you're from Germantown. A lot of we want to say a lot of young black men from Germantown do not make it out of Germantown. We've heard several news clippings and everything like that around this area, but a lot of people want to talk about. I want to talk about how did you navigate society so successfully as a black man, from you being in those situations with I'm different to being the CCO of a multi-million-dollar company. So how did you navigate so successfully? Because I know you said you watched several people from afar. I want to know those black men that you've seen that were close to you, that were connected to you, and how did you navigate so successfully?
Yeah, man. So I'll say this. One, I have to give a lot of credit of my success to my grandmother who raised me, right? I was raised by my grandmother, one of the most courageous and just strong women I've ever met in my life, right? And she's, and the reason I have to start there, right, is because I'm in a family, right? So it's not like I came out the womb on my own and was like, let's get it, But for context, my grandmother's experience is she had 4 sons, and one of them was murdered at 16, right on the corner of our block in Germantown. All of the other 3 spent at least 10 years in prison, right? One of which died in prison, unfortunately. Rest in peace to my Uncle Meat. And my father, who like I mentioned, he's about to be on year 25. So like having those men in my family be the closest examples of black men, and as a kid traveling in and out to the prisons, I really had a clear picture of what I didn't want for myself, and it was like, yo, I understand what people is doing out here in these streets, and I understood the real consequences, right? It wasn't just a figment of imagination for me. It was very real. So like the best thing, that my grandmother ever did for me was really help me understand the power of 2 things. 1, education, and 2, environment, right? Like, and when she decided that she was like, yo, you're going to this high school versus staying where we at, that changed the course of my life. And I'm not saying that you should have to do that, right? It sucks that has to happen, but that's just is what it is in certain scenarios, right? And again, with the context of what she's experienced and what the streets did to her children, it was too clear, right, that she had an opportunity to do something different. But that idea of environment stuck with me my entire life. And I think the next thing that was most critical for my success is when I found other brothers around me, no matter what color they were, right? But when I found other brothers around me that I felt like, yo, we have a similar vision for what we want for ourselves, we have a similar heart space we're coming from, I clung to them tight, because it's like, I knew that like, it could either go one of 2 ways. It's like, yo, I'm out here trying to do something great, and the people around me, the people I share my most intimate ideas and thoughts with, they can either be the people to be like, nah, you bugging, bro. Why you trying to do that? Or they could remind me who I was and be like, yeah, bro, we could do that. Let's go. And I'm willing to help. Yeah. So I think the people that I surrounded myself with, like that little echo chamber, right, what became like the fortress for me, to be able to dream as big as I wanted to dream and not have to hear the naysayers. And one of those brothers is now my co-founder and business partner in this multi-million-dollar venture that we built, right? The other one is also a successful creative entrepreneur, you know what I mean, who we still speak regularly. So it's like the thing that I would want to make sure that I'm articulating clearly is like that power of environment, whether it's putting yourself in the right space physically, but more importantly, like your environment of the people you surround yourself with and really allow to be close to you is going to create your outcome, right? And we hear this growing up, yo, the 5 people that you surround yourself with, right? Like
Yeah.
all that, but it's the realest thing ever, you know? Um, so yeah, that's kind of the things that I think were really responsible for how I've been able to navigate. And then the other thing is just like the mindset of giving more than you take, like always wanting to try to give more of the value. Just in a sense, it's like, come on, a lot of us grow up knowing, and our parents tell us, you better be ready to do twice as much to get half as much, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I don't condone sticking with that mindset forever, but like it's a real thing. And then once you get older and you're just come from is from, a heart space of servant leadership where you're like, yo, I'm willing to give more, I think that's really unlocked a lot of doors for me, whether I knew it in the moments or not. So yeah, environment, obviously self-education, and then that last piece of having that heart of service and being willing to give. Yeah, I think that was the recipe.
I'm not normally speechless, but I want to say thank you for saying, I really do, because you laid it all out. Because I can come from the angle of I had a single parent household, and my mom surrounded me with black men that she trusted.
Mm.
So when I say my Black Mount Rushmore is these black men that I grew up watching.
Yeah.
A lot of people are like, oh, so it's not Jay-Z, it's not. I'm like, no. It's my Uncle Tiger, my papa, who helped me in my primary daycare provider. That was his wife. My Uncle Lenny, the electrician. I got my Uncle Mark. He's a scholar, person that reads all day. He's doing this, doing that. And then I got a good brother, Mr. Colbert.
Who's the last one?
Mr. Colbert. He's a math teacher. So these black men that I look at, I grab something from them and say, you know what? I love that about you.
Yeah.
Let me take that and see how I can put it into the world.
Yeah.
But I also have to remember I have to be me too.
Right.
For lack of a better word, I have to be me. I'm very outspoken. And sometimes I gotta dial it back a little bit. And I think for you and what I'm hearing from you, because I wrote it down, you said education, environment, just service. That's key for what I've seen and what I've experienced. So when you said it, that's why I closed my eyes, because I got emotional, because that's what it is.
That's it.
Yes, it's education from institutions, but it's also self-education. Like you said in the beginning, I had to learn about my history and my blackness. That's what you said.
They wasn't teaching it.
They wasn't teaching it. So when you say environment, I also dig deep into that too, because your environment plays a role. In my opinion, it plays a role in how you get raised.
The deepest role, man. The deepest. And look, I'll give it. I'll say it from a couple different angles, right? Like it's when I was building Rec, right? I really started to immerse myself in learning architecture, right? And the cool thing about architecture, when you really get into it and you start to see the patterns, I had this amazing epiphany of, wait, architecture is actually not about building buildings. Architecture is about designing people.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So as an architect, right, as someone who creates space, if you really get into it, you have the power to say, okay, so what is the outcome that I'm designing for? And then what needs to be in this space to make that outcome possible? Right? So like someone said to me one time, they were like, yo, who's the most important architect in your life? And I was like, I don't know. And then they were like, Ben Franklin, because he designed the row home. And I said, whoa, right? Because Ben Franklin decided, hey, if I could make the footprint of the house as small as possible, I would have to pay less taxes to England. So now we have in Philadelphia, literally most of our blocks and all of our cities are these tall, skinny homes that are all on top of each other, right? And that's created an environment of scarcity, an environment of this and of that, right? So it's just like that environment thing just gets so deep, if we really want to sink into it. But on the flip side, if you get intentional, you design your environment to do what you need it to do for you, right? You want to get in shape, take the snacks out your crib. You know what I'm saying? You want to have some more money. Surround yourself with an environment of people who know how money works, right? And it's easier to say, but like when you actually do those things, you start to realize, like, in our minds, we think willpower works. I want it bad enough, so I'm gonna get it. No, that willpower doesn't work. Like you actually have to design your environment to get the thing you want. So, but I could talk about that all day, man.
I hear
But
you,
yeah.
brother. I know I gave you all these titles and you added yourself into them as well. I do want to ask you, we're going into this space of rep, so representation, expectation, and perception. So these titles that you have, or titles that people have given you, how do you represent them when you walk into a room? As a black man, how do you represent them?
So you gave me some titles. Remind me the titles you gave me in the beginning.
Creative guru.
Yeah.
That's the one I just threw at you.
Yeah, that's a good one.
The stuff I see you do.
Yeah.
Visionary and the CCO.
Yeah. Look, I think specifically those, when I walk into rooms, I rep that creative title with honor, because I believe that God gave me an opportunity to even like reframe what creative looks like to a lot of people. When a lot of people hear that term creative, immediately they kind of think starving artist, right? Which is sad, right? Because it's like, oh, okay, and I understand where it all comes from, but I wear that proudly. Like I walk into a room. I love how Jay-Z said it, right? I'm a big hip hop fan. Like Jay-Z said, I walk into every room as myself.
Yeah.
And I think as a creative, it's even more of that, because you're going to see how I want to express myself, right? Like whether you get it or not, but like from the hat I'm wearing to, the jewelry, the ring I got on, like these are all meaningful things. And like, it took a lot of self-work to even be able to do that, right? So now that I'm here, I do that with pride, because it's like, again, I've designed my life in a way that affords me a certain level of freedom. So it's like, whether I'm, in a recording session with a hip hop artist, or whether I'm at Comcast closing a deal, like you probably gonna see a similar fit from me, right? Like, so I rep that just because it's like, yo, like you might have a preconceived notion at first, but ultimately you're gonna be like, dang, this brother is bringing the heat, like, you know what I mean, in whatever space. So I like to use that well. The visionary title, man, like I think the difference between like a dreamer and a visionary, I think like they're very similar but different, right? To me, the difference is dreamers, they see all these visions while they sleep, but visionaries are the ones who wake up, bring those things into fruition so other people can see them materialize, right, in the real world. And how that shows up for me when I show up in places is I'm gonna show up from an energy of possibility. Right? Like the way my brain works is not, oh, we can't do it. Is, okay, what are we doing? All right, we can figure out the how later, but like it's all possible, right? As long as we're willing to be the people, right? And we develop ourselves to be the people that's possible for. So there's that. And then, the CCO title, man, that's just reminds me that, when I step into rooms, especially representing like rec and things like that, there's 25 people who are working hard every day to make this whole thing of rec go. And fortunately, I got the fun job of being the face of that, right? And the visionary of that. So I always hope to show up in a way that makes them proud. And then I think all those other titles are, the ones I gave myself, and my connection to my family is just, yo, I know I've been afforded an opportunity that many of my family members don't. And I think it'd be disrespectful if I didn't show up and show out in all of those possibilities that I was given, and I think if I do that, I represent them well.
Thank you. I'm glad that last part you just said, because a lot of people don't want you to show out. That's what you got to do.
I got to
represent your family first.
I got to, man. And a lot of people even be asking me, they're like, yo, like, where do you find the motivation to like grind hard every day to do this thing? And like, for me, man, I just have such a deep sense of gratitude for the opportunity I was given, because I'm so clear on what the other paths could have been. Like I said, like, I seen my pop's fate. I've seen my uncle's fate. And even I have brothers who didn't get the same opportunity that I have. So I would just be silly not to be willing to put in the extra hours of work, right? To go the distance. So it's just, yeah, man, I rep them. I rep them. Hopefully, well, if you would ask them, right?
I know we talked about showing up and showing out, and I know you talk about being in different spaces, but bringing the same will. No society has expectations of black men. You may have some on yourself as well, but I do want to hear from you. How do you overcome expectations? Because you said dreamer versus visionary. When I heard it, I heard you say, from what I'm hearing, a dreamer is a person that can just think about it. A visionary is one that'll think about it, but then also put it to action. So for you, what expectations do you have for yourself, and how do you overcome societal expectations?
Man, I'm being honest. I have a lot of expectations for myself, and I'm a Virgo too, so we're very like particular people. My expectations for myself are to be a lifelong learner. You know, that means a lot to me. To be the man of my family that I know I've been created to be. That is like a big expectation. To be an admirable partner, you know, in all senses of the word, and to be great. You know, like that is my expectation of myself, and I'm okay. Like that's fine to me, right? Because I know that I have that within me. So it's like, duh, you know, like, and I think the only way, and you know, society has all these other expectations of me, and I think the only way I was able to like weaken the pool of those actually on my life was to put my own expectations in place.
Okay.
Right? For me, like, I think the only way to like truly not fall victim to like other people's expectations is to be very, very clear on what yours are. You know, like I think society has all these goals for us, and if we're being honest, there's certain behaviors they want to see us, you know, be consumed in, and you know, mindsets that they want us to be thinking through. And it's just too easy to fall victim to them if you don't know who you are and what you actually want for yourself. Right? Like my grandmother, when I was a kid, used to always say, stand for something or you'll fall for anything. And I'm like, I get it, Grandma. You say this all the time, right? But now as a man, I really get it. Like if you don't have that level of intentionality and want for yourself, it's so easy to try to get that love by fulfilling someone else's expectation. But when you really got that self-love brewing, you know, and the right environment around you to affirm it, it's like, yo, why would I even want to fit into that box? Like that don't even feel cool. Being broke ain't cool. Being irresponsible ain't cool. You know what I'm saying? Playing dumb ain't cool, right? Like, but in high school, it kind of looked kind of fly, right? But yeah, man.
I hear you, brother, because when we talk about expectations for ourselves, we kind of critique ourselves to a point where it's like there's no end.
Yeah.
And when you say that last part you said, I just want to be great.
Yeah.
There's a song about that. Like I just want to be great. Like that's how I feel. Like this podcast isn't just because I just want to do it. No, I want to be great, but I also want to show that black men can talk to each other.
Yeah.
Black
men
like engage with one another and have some respectful and understanding conversations.
Yo, Octavius, you know how much work it even required for me to say that one of my expectations for myself is to be great, or even further to say I'm already great.
Yeah.
Like, and it's crazy, right? I am great. Nigga, I'm lit, boy. Forbes 30 under 30, you know what I'm saying? Multi-billion-dollar business. I went from Puff being a mentor on TV to now being my business partner. Like, I'm great, you know? But again, that societal pressure is like, I used to feel like I had to play small, right? Got to make everyone else feel comfortable and all that stuff. So it's like, yeah, man, that societal expectation to kill you if you let it.
It will.
But yeah, man.
I want to thank you for naming things and listing things because as black men, we got to be comfortable with it.
Yeah, I'm a
It's,
published author. I'm a TED Talk speaker. You know what I'm saying?
keep
Like,
going.
all right, I'm done. I appreciate you, brother.
We gotta
Appreciate you.
elevate each other, and that's
Yeah,
the
man.
main thing about this podcast. It's not about just bringing people in. It's like, no, we're gonna have a conversation. We're
Right.
gonna talk, but I'm also gonna engage you. You're gonna express some things. I'm gonna express some things.
Yes,
We're gonna
sir.
empower each other, but then I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
elevate you. I'm like, hey, bro, keep going. Like that's what we
Yeah,
need. We need to
absolutely.
see young black men need to see these conversations.
That's right.
They need to see how to uplift their brother in a
Mm-hmm.
positive way, and
Mm-hmm.
not the negative ways that we've been seeing.
Right. That's
But I
right.
do wanna move on to this other question that I have for you because
Sure.
yes, you said societal expectations will kill you. And I can definitely understand that. But society doesn't really know or understand the black man, in my opinion.
Mm,
And when I get to this question, it takes brothers a long time, but it's a
mm.
very meaningful conversation. Um, how do you want society to perceive black men as a whole?
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I see why I'd be taking some brothers a minute. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How do I want society to see black men as a whole? All right. Two words came up for me first. So I'll start there. The first one is multifaceted
Mm-hmm.
and multidimensional, right? Because I think society tries to paint us all with one broad brush, like, um, and I'll come back and talk more about it. But then the second one is as creators,
Mm-hmm.
you know, on the multidimensional point, it's like, when I think of society, right, I think of who runs that, and I think the mind of society is run by the media, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I think about like how the media, especially like a decade ago and before that, how they depicted us as black men, it was always this like dangerous, like unapproachable,
Mm-hmm.
tougher than tough, like you know what I mean. Like that was how I felt like they wanted us to see us, and then you go even deeper, and then you go into the political realm, and then you start hearing people like Hillary Clinton calling us super predators and things like that when she's talking about black boys.
Yeah.
It's like that narrative is there's nothing further from the truth, like so I want society to see black men as the multiplicity of who we are. Like, yes, we can be tough and strong, but we can
Mm-hmm.
also be sensitive and compassionate. Like, yes, we can be hero breadwinners, but also we can be nurturers and are nurturers, right? Like, so I think there's a multiplicity, right, of like what I want them to think of black men as, but also like the black experience.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, there's these things that many of us all experience because of our skin tone, but also like we got athletes and we got nerds, we got scientists and we got, phenomenal artists. Like there's a whole range, like, so there's that. And then on the other side, like, I just feel like black men and black women too. But
Yeah.
since we just specifically talking about black men, I just don't think we get enough credit for the creators that we are. Like, we grow up and maybe we'll hear, one or two things about George Washington Carver, right? And and like
The
things
main
like that.
ones. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's like so much of culture has been created by us, like whether we're talking about inventions or we're talking about the ideas that have moved society forward, like it's us. And I think people have this conversation around our labor,
Mm-hmm.
right? And how influential that has been to especially America, but to the world.
Yeah.
But our intellect though, our creativity and our genius, I think needs to be in that conversation just as much as the labor of our bodies. So yeah, I would hope that society starts to paint us with a broader picture and including our multiplicity and including our creator power.
Again, thank you, because you broke it. That second part you said, you broke it down, and you didn't just say, Oh, yeah, we're creative. We invented everything. Like you could have just stopped right there. You said we're
Yeah,
geniuses.
we are geniuses.
We've invented a lot of things that have started and pushed this world forward.
Hmm.
We technically, are creators. We created everything. And, and a lot of people are not
Yeah.
recognizing that side. And I'm glad that you
Yeah.
said you distinguished it too. You said, hey, we did labor over here. But as this generation saw, hey, we can do some things a little bit differently. Let's take this labor work,
Yep.
move it over here, and now we can go over here and create some
Yeah, bro. And it's like you could talk about that specifically through the lens of like modern times,
things. Mm-hmm.
or we can even talk about it like in the beginning of time, right? Like I have this running joke with my homies. It's like when we engage with folks who are not melanated and they
Mm-hmm.
consider themselves liberals, right? I
Yeah.
just think it's so funny if you really want to see where somebody's like heart and mind is. Have a conversation about the pyramids,
Hmm.
right? Because it's like you start to ask the right questions, and then it's like, hey, yeah, I'll give black people credit for this. Y'all invented that, yo. I'll give black people credit for this. And then you start talking about the pyramids, and all of a sudden we got to talk about aliens. What are we doing, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just funny because it's just, again, like sometimes people are so conditioned to not want to give black people the credit of our brilliance and our genius. And you start talking about the pyramids, and it's like, oh, there's no way the technology there could have been done by a human. No, there's no way maybe yo folks couldn't do it, but like
Yeah.
we created math. You know what I'm saying? We created science. So like, come on, yo, come up off our credit, bro. All right, I'm done.
No, yeah, brother. We need it. We needed to hear that. And I do want to tell you a little bit about. I know we talked about the podcast a little bit, but in this space of wealth of knowledge or woke, I love to talk to brothers around this space of bringing the younger generation and the older generation a little bit closer and having an understanding and break down that tension that we see. Because I know in our generation, we have to listen to the older generation, but we also got to get back to the younger generation. And this is my way of showing that. And showing that, hey, y'all are saying the same exact thing. I hear you, but you got to listen. So how can I move out the way and have you two come together and create opportunities and share information, like good brother Kyle Odom said in episode 1 of season 2. So we got to share knowledge and create opportunity. So I do want to ask you this question of what piece of advice would you give the younger generation and the older generation just to break down that tension? Or you can say, hey, young brother, I hear you. Or hey, OG,
Yeah.
or offering game.
Yeah.
How can we create this a little bit better for this young
brother? That's good. I think you're already hitting it on the head with just like listening, right? Like the importance of really engaging in meaningful conversation and listening to really hear and understand, right? And not be waiting to talk. Because I think, and I've experienced it as a young person, you sometimes feel like the OGs are so in their ways that they just really, they think they know what's right and don't really have a heart space of being willing to be wrong. Right. And with that mindset, growth really can't happen, and I think there is a lot of youngins, even beyond our generation, right? These Gen Z, youngins are brilliant, right?
Yeah.
But they genuinely grew up in a world that is different than how we grew up, right? Like all these posts, like all these kids who grew up in a time where the internet was free and accessible, like on your phone, their brains fundamentally work differently than us. And they have so much to offer us, right? Not just in technology, but in how they see the world and how they see society. So I think it's about the OGs, sitting and listening. And then it's the same exact on the other side. It's like, there's no greater teacher in life than real, true experience, right? And I think as a young person, if you 15, 16, you have so little actual life experience that you can't even understand the value of life experience, So it's like, at that point, you just got to shut up and listen, So I think it's just how do we break the ice and create that space for conversing and knowledge sharing and listening. Um, but to be honest with you, I think there's a deep level of trust building that's required for that to even work, right? Um, I'll put it like this: like I think for me and a lot of my friends that are also Black men, many of us grew up in homes where like we didn't have a dependable father in the household, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what we realized later on is it may have even taken us longer in our life to even understand the importance of having a mentor that is a Black man.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because we didn't even know how to really navigate that relationship with an older Black man because the trust wasn't there,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I think there's like the trust building that has to happen. And like, unfortunately, if I'm just like a 15, 16-year-old kid who don't come from a lot of money, so I want to get money, the thing that signals I can trust you is the things that are showing me that you visibly have money,
Yeah.
which are the worst things to build trust over, right? But that's just what it is. So it's like, how do we make sure that like we find ways to rewrite those narratives of like, yo, we can trust each other, we need each other, we're seen as valuable to the other.
Mm-hmm.
And if we could do that, then I think people can actually come to the table and be like, okay, cool, let's build.
Mm. Okay. I love that because it's we're in a space of you got to figure out how to build together and how to grow
Got
together,
it.
and
Mm-hmm.
that's that's what I'm all about. I'm not about holding doors, like closing doors on people and
Yeah.
not giving them opportunities or, hey, brother, this is for you. It's not for me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'll elevate you and put you in the space, but you don't got to do anything later for me, brother.
Mm.
I'm here.
That's,
Like,
that's actual love.
yeah, like I'm here. I love you. I'm going to put you
Yeah.
in this space. If it's not for you, give it to somebody else. I
Yeah.
think for me, it's just a better understanding of I want to see us as Black men, yes, Black people, but Black men grow together as a whole. You say, hey, that door right there is closed. Do you have the key for that door?
Mm.
Will can say, yeah, I got the key. All right, I don't need it. I just need you to connect with this young brother right here because he might need to go through it later at some point in time.
Yeah.
So if he calls you, he's going to need you to open up the door. And you can't stand in his way. We can't be gatekeepers of what opportunities lead behind that door because it's not for me. And I think for there are various different doors that I talk about with people. You got the glass door, you got the revolving door, you got the door that's wedged open and you can see, but God is like, you're not ready yet. I'll let you see through it, and I'll let you stick your arm to see how the weather is, because that's what we do. We stick our hand out and like, it's a little cold. I'm gonna go back in and adjust. And I think that's one thing that we don't recognize. And I think the one door that I pride myself on is the glass door, because you can see what's ahead, and it's locked. You cannot open it, but you can see everything that's ahead. You don't have the key of it. This young brother behind you got the key. You got to tell him what's coming up next. You have to, because if you don't, he's going to fall. He's going to trip, and then he can't come back. He can't, because now he can't trust you. That's just what I've seen, what I've experienced with some young brothers. If I don't tell you what's going to happen, I can't trust you no more. So now I can't talk to you. I'm going over here to this dude over here that, like you said, has the money that can do things for me.
Yeah.
But you just opened up the door and just said, go ahead. From what I've seen and experienced, you can't do that with these young brothers now. You got to tell them.
Good.
You got to tell them. So I do want to ask you, just to go right into this question, what's one thing from your experience or opportunities and anything that you have experienced in your life, what's one thing brothers can do to grow together? Like from your experience, you've seen brothers that grow together and just build. They're just like, look, brother, we can do this. What's one thing? Like, what's that one thing that brothers can do to grow together?
Find a way to be vulnerable. Find a way to be vulnerable. Yeah, I think healthiest, longest standing relationships that have been productive that I've seen, whether it's myself included or outside of myself, between Black men, um, is they're courageous enough to be vulnerable with each other and be like, yo, bro, this is what I could bring to the table. But also, these are the things that I actually struggle with, and I can't have you depend on me for this. Right. Um, and again, it's that idea of like not thinking about it like a liability that like, oh, I can't be found out for this. I don't know how, it's like, no, just put it on the table. Because if y'all genuinely are both interested in building, now it's like, oh, cool. We got the clarity. We're gonna go hire somebody for that, right? Or yo, I know how to do that well. I could teach you real quick, and you're gonna be straight. Like, but what happened to me in my own experience, what happens if like you have that mentality of being found out because you don't want to be vulnerable, then you start doing weird stuff, right? All because you just don't want to say, hey, bro, I struggle with this. So you start trying to overcompensate. You start doing things that don't even make sense, right? But I think there's something really special that happens when like brothers could come together. Ain't no like faking the funk. You ain't wearing no mask. You ain't trying to posture. It's like, yo, bro, like this is genuinely the desire of my heart, where I'm trying to go. This is what I can contribute. This is what I need support with, and if everybody's doing that, there's this communication that opens up that really allows you to actually be productive consistently, and really allows like this compounding of energy and effort that it's really hard to describe. But it's like, if you come in early and be vulnerable, everything gets lighter. You start running faster. You know what I'm saying? Like you're shining brighter. So yeah, I'd say early on, find a way to be vulnerable.
I was quiet. You heard me. I didn't say not one word while you was talking, because that when I asked that question, I try to be as quiet as possible.
Mm.
Because I want to listen. I want to take heed of what you're saying, and not sitting and say, okay, what's the next question?
Mm.
No, I got to listen to what this brother is saying. All the brothers that have been on,
mm-hmm.
I haven't said, yep, yeah.
That's good.
I'm trying to take in what you just said. So you saying be vulnerable, but then explaining why. It was very important for me. And me and my growth. I'm 29 going on 30 next week, February 12th. So it's like,
let's go. Happy birthday, bro.
Thank you. So when you sit there and say, hey, I don't know how to do that, and somebody can accept that and sit there and say, you know what, I got you. Don't worry about it. We're gonna learn this together, or I can teach you. That's one thing that I'm excited to hear from you. You just said that, because now I'm taking it and saying, okay, how can I go into this space and be vulnerable with the people that I want to build with, and say, look, I'm gonna be honest with y'all, I'm not doing none of this stuff. I just know how to bring Black men together. Sure. Let's figure something out. So Will, I'm be honest with you right now. If I call you and say, hey brother, I'm just bringing a lot of brothers together. We're gonna build something. I don't know what it is.
That's it.
I'm calling every Black man. You go be one. Like, and I'm gonna hang up the phone, because that's all I know how to do, is bring Black men together and let them build, and let them be in a space to understand each other. Go ahead, brother.
And the beauty is, when you're in the right space, that is enough. Yeah. That gift alone, right, is a superpower, and it is enough, And I want to be clear, like, this is still something that I have to work through and remind myself of as well, right? Like, these are things you got to renew, because even like I have a very clear short memory of, like, I'll never forget when we were on the fundraising journey. And we were working through the deal with Combs Enterprises and their investment fund. There's a couple brothers over there. Shout out to Tarek Brooks, who's a phenomenal guy. Jay Lundy, head of investments over there, who's a phenomenal guy. And I will never forget, there was a moment where we realized that for my co-founder Dave and I, this would be the first time we were going to have someone else join our board, right? And that's a very meaningful part of a business, like in the journey, because then it's like, me and the person who built it under the hood, right? There's someone else now who has a real voice and decision-making power, right? And in the beginning, I thought that the best way to handle that was like, I had to be the superstar to Tarek, and he had to see me as like, I got it all figured out. And I was like, over time, I'm like, I am bugging. This guy has built $1 billion businesses before, not $1 million, $1 billion businesses. So if I don't take an opportunity to like go to him with my biggest problems, right? Like not on some like just complaining, but like, yo, I'm struggling to figure this part of the business out. He can only help me when I do that. Right? If I'm trying to front, he can't even really help. But then it's like a beautiful feeling of like you tell him the thing that keeps you up at night. And then he's like, oh, well, in the last 7 businesses that I've run, this is how we solve that. That's very normal. And then I'm like, oh, all right. You know what I'm saying? Like, and it really just be like that. So I'm still learning it myself, but I just know it to be true, man. That vulnerability is a superpower.
Thanks for adding that, brother. I really do. So before we end, I'm gonna just hit you with, because we're about to go into the space of elevation. This is where I elevate you. As far as elevation, brother, I want you to talk about all the things you got coming up in your life. You can talk about personal, you can talk about business. I just want to elevate you right now. So what you got going on?
All right, cool. So yeah, some of the things top of mind. I published my first book last year. It's called Uncommon Sense: Your Strategy Guide to Creative Freedom. So it's really this like strategy guide for anyone who's like, I'm passionate about my thing. I love what I'm doing, but I really need to understand how to build a scalable and a sustainable business, right, around it. The book is for you, right? Literally the rule book of how to get paid to be yourself, right? 10 chapters, super simple, from how to really get clear on it, understand who you are, to how to build a brand, right? We always use this word brand and most of us don't really understand what that means, but like how to actually build a powerful brand, how to use, social media to communicate with your people, build a tribe. And then most importantly, how to protect your intellectual property, how to, operate your business in a way that Uncle Sam not going to try to take it from you. Right. So that's all in a very simple guide, so go get that. If you think that resonates with you, it's on Amazon, but you can also get it at shop.recphilly.com if you want to get it directly from us, because we get more money that way. You know what I'm saying? So the book, I'm really proud of that. And that's the first of, right? There will be more, which is awesome. I have a TED Talk out, when will we start teaching freedom is the theme. So check that out, especially if you're an educator and thinking about what's important, especially for educating Black boys and Black men. That's out. And then on, more of the rec front, we're really blessed that, we've got over 1,000 active members here at Rec Philly. Our space is here in the Fashion District, aka the Gallery. Everyone's know, right? But we've been able to, fortunately figure it out, and other communities around the world have been reaching out to figure out how, we can bring the model to them. So the first expansion is in process right now. Rec Miami is opening later this year, which is crazy and beautiful and a blessing. So that's all happening. And also I'll elevate myself by saying I'm out here, developing as a speaker, so for folks who, would love for me to speak to their folks, holla at me. I want to make myself available to that, especially if there's, people of color and creatives in that space. That's where I'm most passionate. What am I missing? Yeah, I think that's mostly it. Check out recphilly.com, joinrec.com, and just follow me too, because I think, you can stick around for the journey, and all the things I'm forgetting, they'll eventually cross my Instagram. So follow me. Hopefully you put it in the show notes or something.
Oh, I definitely will, brother. I'll put cool. Everything you just said, they will have links in the description.
Oh, that's love. That's love. Appreciate that.
Brother, I want to say thank you. I really do. I want to say thank you. I'm glad that we went on this journey through the E4 model that I'm creating. Yes, I love you for being in this space. I love you for what you're doing. I love you just being you, brother. Just be very honest. Can't nobody be a Will Thomas, brother. Nobody.
Listen, man. I'm trying to do my best, man, because ain't nobody else gonna be me. So, but yo, Octavius, thank you for the space, man. Thank you for the work that you're doing. I think this is just crucially important. I appreciate you allowing me to come and share to your folks. And Also, I'm excited for all the other things we'll get to do after this. I feel like
Yeah,
this is just the very
this is
tip
just
of
the
the
beginning.
iceberg, right? It's the beginning, and yeah, I'm excited to be in community with you, bro. So
Thank
thank
you,
you.
brother. I want to thank you all for listening. I want to thank you all for joining us. We will have another dope brother with you all next month, so get ready for that. We want to say thank you. Check out our website, check out our YouTube channel, check out our Instagram, all the things that you want to talk about Everything Media. We share, produce, and create content for and about Black men and boys. Peace.